Thanks very much, Matt. I really appreciate your time. And thanks for making the time to answer a couple of questions as well, given the disproportionate importance of digital identity in the fintech space, because obviously one of our real goals is to reduce the overall cost of financial intermediation to make the UK a better place to do business, and digital identity is integral to that. So just to emphasize, it's really important to us, so thank you. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about, I guess, about the new direction, if that's okay, because there's quite a few people here, I'm sure, who are very happy to see this shift to a more framework-based approach, which I think we would all agree is a better way forward. I am sort of curious, because there are other jurisdictions doing this as well. Have you been looking at what other people, I mean, we're not too insular in this, are we? Have you been looking at other jurisdictions, what they're doing?
No, absolutely. And on the one hand, it's really important to realise that Britain is not Estonia. We can't pick up and we can't cut and paste someone else's system. But we've also got to realise that there are countries that are way ahead of us on this, and we've got to learn from what they've done. We've got to learn. We've got to leapfrog, I think, in some ways, some of the mistakes that other places have made. And there are some countries, which is probably prudent not to name, which have got systems in place that we absolutely know we don't want to do that. And learning what we don't want to do is just as important. But also, this is to some extent about international interoperability. And so where we've been looking at, so for instance, where we've been talking to what you might think of as the big comparable economies, the US, Canada, France, that sort of thing. We've also been talking to other countries that have done interesting things, the Nordics, for instance, where I think we want to end up with something that where our systems talk to their systems, of course we do, but we also want to be able to say that we have, I think, shamelessly stolen the best bits of their system, and that should be the right approach. And I think it won't be cut and paste one version of any one system, but it will be trying to take the best from other countries.
No, I mean, I've been quite impressed by, Canada is a good example, actually. They went for a very early framework-based approach. I see Australia and New Zealand have gone in that same direction, or with a more regulatory framework. So the idea of a framework is to have not one digital identity, exactly, right, but to have a group of interoperable digital identities. I don't know whether the proposed EU digital identity will be one of them or not. But that also hinges on better private sector use. I mean, without being too critical, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of one of the problems in the past was that there wasn't the take-up in the private sector that had been hoped for. And that really is something we have to get right this time. I wonder if you could just amplify a little bit on what you said about working more closely with the private sector. So
I think, on the one hand, we've got to genuinely collaborate. This has got to be something where there is a genuine understanding of what is it that the private sector needs to make the compelling products that government wants to see. And the good news, if you like, is that what we have seen is the private sector being really enthusiastic to engage with us. And what we want to try and do is as I say, what are the sort of very first products that will demonstrate to the sector and to the citizen, if you think of it, not that they're opposing interests, but they need to be complementary. What are those opening products? And the examples that we've used around house purchases are the sort of really obvious pain points. But then there are plenty of others around. In previous speeches, I've talked about sort of buying a house or buying a pint kind of thing. It's sort of these are things where it is absolutely ripe for digital identity to play a part, not in a way that's compulsory, but if you run a pub, you have a real interest in not serving underage people because potentially your license is at risk. That is a world away from house purchases, but it shows you the breadth of what compelling products could look like.
Well, I mean, this is why a framework is a preferable approach,
exactly.
Precisely because there'll be different identities, but the sort of nirvana of, you know, I can use my Barclays identity to log into HMRC. I can use my HMRC identity to, you know, do whatever. That requires real work to make it happen because there's various elements of standardization, in particular around the credentials side of things. So I'm not underestimating how much effort, but I'm just like pushing you a little bit on what exactly is going to happen to facilitate more of that. You talked a little bit about consulting.
So I think I mean at this stage the main thing is consulting so that we can get the legislation right, so that we can get the next iterations of the framework right. And I suppose there's not that much more I can say about that, because the point of the consultation is that we don't prejudge it. But at the same time, I think what you will see, I hope, is a genuine openness to think further, to potentially go further that we had, in the past, recognising that maybe that's why it didn't work in the past, and we need to do things differently to make it work now.
Right. One of the things that might help, I mean, none of us would have really kind of wanted it this way, but in an odd sort of way, the pandemic has actually, I think, changed the landscape around this a little bit, hasn't it? Because, because prior to this, we would have had discussions about the cost benefit of digital identity and all this sort of thing, and verify versus whatever. But the pandemic has kind of highlighted the cost of not having an infrastructure, and those costs, in my estimation, have turned out, well, not in my, the Treasury's estimates of the pandemic loans that are never going to be repaid and all this sort of thing are absolutely billions. So now we have an idea of what not having the infrastructure costs, and it's a lot. I'm kind of hoping that you're going to reassure us that in I don't call it the post-pandemic period, I call it the inter-pandemic period, because of course there will at some point be another one. But am I just imagining this, or is the big picture shifting a bit around this? Like, we're moving away from this, oh my God, we don't want identity cards or be like China, into actually a digital identity is something that a modern state needs to function and to support citizens when things go a bit wrong. That's an outsider's view. How does it look inside government?
No, I think you're absolutely right in one way, that we have, in circumstances that no one would wish to repeat, we have demonstrated the huge value of the internet more broadly. If you imagine the pandemic 10 years previously, then without functioning broadband for people to educate their children when schools closed, without online shopping, without all of that stuff, then it's simply unimaginable. We wouldn't have been able to carry on in the way that we've carried on at all. Yeah. So I think openness to the potential of digital in its broadest possible sense, and a willingness to try out what is genuinely new, is now much more widespread across society than it was before. So if you think of that as whether it's the sort of metaphorical granny that's done online shopping for the first time, or whether it's people that have spent a lot more time in front of Netflix than they had previously anticipated, there's a lot more openness. And I think digital identity is at the sort of outer edge of some of that, but it is very much something that people see now as, why can't I do this obvious thing online? Why can't I make sure that things that are still in lots of ways incredibly paper-based, why can we not bring the government version of that and the regulated version of that in line with the kind of innovation that we see in the private sector? And I think we should be really optimistic about getting on with that, and we should be really optimistic about the public appetite for it.
Oh, no, I'm definitely optimistic about it. I mean, I guess where I was going on that is that you're absolutely right. I mean, we would not have been able to continue without a massive economic, I mean, we've taken a big economic hit anyway, but I know exactly what you mean. But of course, we've also brought millions of people online doing business online bank who weren't there before, and thus they've been a little bit vulnerable to some of the frauds and things going around, where I would expect to see digital identity going up the agenda in response to that. I think that's what I was saying. I'm just wondering if that's how you see it from the inside.
Well, we certainly need, I think, to find ways of talking about identity being something that makes things more secure, less susceptible to fraud, in a way that feels like it is both a good defensive thing to be doing, but also this stuff is enabling broader opportunities as well. So it's both a good defense and a good potential new thing to be doing as well. So I think if you get this right, and I really do think there's every reason to think we can get it right, then it is a virtuous circle of making people safer online, online, more secure in their finances or whatever it might be, while also being able to do stuff that they simply weren't previously able to do at the kind of pace that they can now do it and do it digitally. So I think we should be really optimistic.
I think we should, in the UK at least, we should have a vision of setting a high bar. We want security and privacy. We don't want trade-offs between these things. And I hope that you could enlist some of the brilliant companies we have here to make that happen.
Well, and one of the great things about London's position and the UK's position more broadly is that there is that wealth of talent there, and actually in some ways, particularly outside London, there is that wealth of talent that is champing at the bit to get on with this stuff, and government is really keen to work with that chunk of the private sector to get this done properly. So all the more reason for everyone here and more broadly to get on board, engage with those consultations, help us get this right, because it really can be a win-win.
Thank you. Well, I'm not just saying it because you're sitting here, Matt, but there's a lot of us who are looking to the new approach, the framework-based approach, the way you've decided to take it forward, with some actual genuine optimism. So if we can help, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you very much for giving up your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.